Good evening, everyone. My name is Marina Isgro, and I'm Associate Curator of Media and Performance Art at the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for NFTs, Fad or the Future of Art, part of the museum's weekly series, Talking to Our Time. Excuse me. Tonight, we've assembled a dynamic panel of experts from different corners of the art world to help us understand the current NFT craze and to debate the future of blockchain technology's impact on artists and cultural institutions. I will keep my introduction very short, but just want to clarify a few points before we get started. NFTs have recently captured the art world's attention following the sky-high sale of Beeple's Everydays, The First 5,000 Days at Christie's in mid-March. Thanks in part to that sale, many people new to the conversation may think of NFTs as synonymous with digital artworks, but really the situation is more complex than that. So first, some quick definitions. A blockchain is essentially a digital record of transactions that is distributed across a decentralized network of computers. The big advantage of a blockchain is that transactions are permanently recorded and verifiable without the need for a central authority. An NFT, or a non-fungible token, is a unique piece of data registered on a blockchain that can serve as a surrogate or certificate of authenticity for various kinds of objects in the digital and real worlds. In the case of the Beeple, for example, the token lives on the Ethereum blockchain and points to the JPEG image, which is actually stored elsewhere. NFTs have potentially exciting implications for artist rights and promise solutions to problems around provenance and transparency. They've also provoked critical responses from those who question their close association with the volatile world of cryptocurrency, their environmental impact, and the uncharted legal issues they raise. So I look forward to delving into some of these issues tonight with our distinguished panelists. So let me welcome them all now. Please go ahead and turn on your cameras. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to introduce everyone very briefly, and I'm going to go in alphabetical order. So Anne Bracegirdle is an art and blockchain thought leader. She is currently head of sales US for Convelio and co-founder of the Art and Antiquities Blockchain Consortium. She previously led digital strategy at Superblue. And while at Christie's New York, she spearheaded the Art and Tech Initiative. Claudia Hart is an artist and professor in the Department of Film, Video, New Media, and Animation at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Her work examines issues of identity and representation as they relate to computing and simulations technologies. Claudia's works are widely exhibited and collected by institutions including MoMA, the Met, and the Whitney. Okay, Kenny Schachter. Kenny, can you turn on your camera for us? Is an artist, curator, writer, and art dealer who has been an active presence in the art world for nearly 30 years. There he is. In addition to writing widely for various international publications, Schachter has a regular column on artnet.com, where he has recently written a series of articles on NFTs and the virtual art market. And he is joining us tonight from Vienna. So many thanks, Kenny, for staying awake for us. And finally, Jerry Saltz. Jerry Saltz is the senior art critic at New York Magazine and one of the most influential culture writers working today. He is the winner of the 2018 Pulitzer Prize in Criticism and the 2019 National Magazine Award. So welcome, everyone. Tonight we'll be speaking for about 40 minutes, and then we'll open it up to audience Q&A. So if you'd like to submit a question, you can do that at any time throughout the talk by using that Q&A button on Zoom. So with that, I think we'll kick it off with a question for each panelist. And I want to start with Jerry. So Jerry, as we all know, your day job is as a critic, but you recently waded into the NFT market. So you minted an NFT together with Kenny and auctioned it off for charity. So could you tell us what that experience was like? There it is.
Hi, everybody. I'm really honored to be here and with these panelists, and any of you at home watching this, thank you, thank you. Yes, I am an art critic. I know nothing about NFTs, cryptocurrency, or poetry. But it doesn't mean that I can't immensely want to delve into whatever the form is, country and Western, ABBA, or an Indian raga, or idiot NFTs. My NFT, which I immediately thought of to call Kenny Schachter, because he was the only one I thought that would know how to do this without, I don't know, craziness, was actually a response to the obscene, grotesque price that the bad Beppel fetched at some auction at Christie's or Sotheby's. People like me don't even know the difference of the houses, but and the racism and the xenophobia and the sexism and the homophobia in the 5,000 images. I was appalled, like everybody. And I thought, fuck that, man. And I'll make an NFT with Kenny. And we did. I also hated, before I finished this too long a story, that the art world had an instantaneous negative knee-jerk response to it. Like every fucking person went, oh, NFTs, they're not art. NFTs aren't real. And you really want to say they're as real as the internet. They're as real as, you know, a toothache, for God's sake, or as real as your idea of whatever God. So immateriality is immaterial to me. So I guess we'll talk about it later. We made this, I got this Instagram, I learned how to make it talk, and we turned my first 10,000 Instagram posts into this idiot NFT. And we'll talk about what happened with it and the reactions later. But yeah, I'm a one-time artist. I'm a blue chip artist who sold one work of art for $95,000. And every penny of it, you guys, before you hate Kenny and me, every damn dime of it went to cancer or suicide prevention. So thank you too.
Thank you, Jerry. So Kenny, I want to turn to you now. You have written a series of articles on NFTs for ArtNet, and in one of them, describe yourself as cynically idealistic about their potential. So I wanted to ask you, what got you interested in the topic of NFTs, and what do you find exciting about it?
Thank you again. Thank you for having me as well. And the title of this discussion is, are they bad or are they the future? And I think they're both and neither at the same time. Are NFTs the future of art? The future of art is art. Good art is good art, no matter in what form it rears its head. So I think that really, and is it bad? It's no worse or better than a painting, a sculpture, a video, or any other form of art. It just is. So on the positive side, I'm, let's say, deep into middle age, and I've been trying to make art in one form or another for 30 years, and often I employ digital means to make it. And this I've been doing since the early 90s, making animations, digitally created videos, and even computer prints on vinyl back in the mid 90s. Because the art world is so conservative, and you could see by what Jerry mentioned, this knee-jerk reaction, the art world has a fear of everything that's not itself. So the reaction was kind of absurd, that all of these objections that were immediately raised were really the province of the traditional art world as we knew it. Complaints about the environment. Well, no one ever complained about single-use wooden crates to ship a painting from one location and back, and the crates get thrown in the garbage. No one complained about an 80-foot Damien Hirst bronze sculpture and the carbon footprint that such a thing would entail. Or for that matter, flying all over the world to see a bunch of fungible, idiotic art fairs that we all felt the fear of missing out if we didn't hop on board, me included. So anyway, also talk of money laundering and artists, NFTs as currency, and the lack of an easy way of viewing or not viewing them. The majority of art bought and sold in the contemporary art sector these days are stored in free ports and not looked at either. Me personally, because the art world is so quick to pigeonhole and categorize people, a dilettante used to be something that was looked favorably upon historically. I write, and I have been doing so for 30 years. I've been teaching, starting at the New School. Right now I'm teaching at School of Visual Arts, New York University and University of Zurich. And I've been making art since the beginning, and I've had to resort to buying and selling art to make a living, not by choice, but by economic necessity. Never in my life did I ever think to see the day that I would have a windfall. I actually sold NFTs for profit, unlike Jerry. But when I first got involved, unlike most people that think about NFTs, or the typical notion one would have is money, money, money. But when I started in September, before anyone in the world other than digital makers knew what it was, most people still don't, I had no intention of using it to make money. I did it as a way, as a digital art maker, to have a way to disseminate my work into the stream of commerce. I made all of $4,000, and I was wildly grateful for that fact. Also, the art world, most people in the art world, and it grew to be me included, would never characterize myself as an artist, because the art world thinks that because I do teaching and writing and I've sold art to resort to make a living, they wouldn't even call me an artist. And it got to the point where I wouldn't call me an artist. And not that I don't value money for money, not in the least. I've never basically done I would do everything I do for free in the art world. More often than not, I do by default. But anyway, to wrap it up, I did it a second time when I was writing my first feature on the subject for ArtNet, and I sold 550 pieces in about 10 minutes and made more money in those 10 minutes from art and that I had ever made in 30 years of practicing. And for the first time, even though the criteria is completely stupid, I felt maybe I am an artist because people cared enough to buy it and collect it. And because of my writing and my lecturing on the subject, I've had literally more than 100 people write me that me helping to shepherd them, like Jerry, through this process has enabled these people to make a living in a way they never thought they would be able to. And that's an extraordinary thing at any stage of life. And I'm grateful to share the information and to inspire people to follow suit. And there was nothing bad about that process for me.
Great, thank you, Kenny. So now I wanted to turn to Anne for a different perspective. Anne, you've been working on issues related to art and the blockchain for several years, and you co-founded a nonprofit that's actually tokenizing objects of cultural heritage. So could you tell us a little bit about your interest in the technology and kind of what you see as its most promising applications?
Yeah, definitely. And thank you again for including me. And yes, I'm sorry to anyone who's watching or listening and hoping that we only talk about NFTs in their current in the current iteration as fine art, because for me, the most potential lies in blockchain's potential to serve as a foundation for the industry. And I became so excited about blockchain itself after 8 years of being a specialist at Christie's and realizing like that all of the guiding principles of blockchain technology are directly linked to the biggest issues within the art world, right? And like could crystallize, like could revolutionize particular problems that we see over and over again, right? So simplified transactions, increased transparency, increased trust, increased security, empowered users, like all of these elements that guide blockchain can simplify so many processes in the art world that make it so difficult to engage and to be a buyer or a seller or even someone who works in the industry. So for me, the NFT that has the most potential is an NFT as a token for a physical piece of art or for related as an identity for a human, for a collector or a seller, et cetera. And so for me, if blockchain's potential to serve as a foundation on which all institutions transact and on which all of, all pieces in the industry, serve on the same foundational, essentially like the foundation of our industry. And then similarly, all collectors and people who engage in the art world would have a digital identity that links to their pieces. It would just simplify, it would consolidate provenance, it would consolidate value. There would be opportunities to create automatic collection management systems. So yeah, for me, the real potential lies in blockchain's capacity, not necessarily as NFT in the way that we're currently seeing it now.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then Claudia, you have been creating digital art for decades and played a key role in bringing a feminist perspective into that field. So a few weeks ago, you published a feminist manifesto of the blockchain, and I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, to backtrack, I want to add something not in the question, which is that I have been working in a space which is experimental digital art since the mid-90s, as Kenny talked about. It's been there, and we're talking about NFTs, but NFTs, the reason why this is great and why I wanted to write and think about it is that the NFT is the tip of an iceberg of a giant space in which people do many things. And as you mentioned, the token refers to a thing outside of it. So it's not, when I think of what is NFT, I think of the entire landscape of practitioners who work with digital art. So that's that. And you asked me about the manifesto. So in the fall, I did a show with Bitform's Gallery, in which I imagined the centerpiece of it was a kind of game world in which I imagined myself as making forgeries of Picassos and Matisses within a game space as these little models, 3D models within the game space. And so I started thinking at that point about forgery and copyright and how these evolved in history. And then thinking, well, if I was forging these things, I could also make them real. I could make them authentic within my imaginary world by blockchain, by putting them, tokenizing them on the blockchain. So that was in the fall, and I became obsessively involved in thinking about making real, what it means to make that you can, in a very abstract way, authenticate something in an ontological way. You can take an imaginary space, which is a digital landscape, and identify it as real cryptographically. You can give birth to this real thing. So the manifesto was talking about identity, how we can invent our own identity, including a gender identity, and make it real through a smart contract in a way we can authenticate ourselves by giving birth to ourselves through minting. So not minting, yes, minting. See, the mining minting thing gets confusing.
That's true, it does.
And we're going to have to talk about that later when we talk about environmental issues, because there's a lot of concern about that.
And we'll talk about that soon. But I think first I want to back up a little bit because you mentioned smart contracts. And kind of one of the big promises of NFTs, obviously, is that they can help solve certain issues around artists' rights that have been at stake and debated in the art world since the 1970s. On the other hand, we've seen some people argue that the NFT market is sort of just replicating or reproducing the inequalities of the traditional art world. So I would love, especially the artists on our panel, Claudia and Kenny, to tell us a little bit about where they fall in that debate. I don't know which one of you wants to start.
I'd like to pick it up because it's related to what I was saying about my community, which is the alternative media or digital or whatever. So you also asked in the questions to talk about a couple of shows that I'm currently in, NFT shows, and they're both sitting on platforms, experimental NFT platforms that are addressing just exactly what you asked, which I can't even remember exactly what it was. But one of them is on Ferrofile, which is a platform that is created by Casey Rios, who's also a digital artist. And the other one is Left.Gallery, which was an artist-run space, collaborated with Transfer Gallery, and they both created shows. That one, the Transfer one is called Pieces of Me, and on Ferrofile, it's called, I have to look at it, the Bardo Unpacking the Real. So it's about levels of reality. And those things are absolutely involved in the idea of a share economy, In other words, the profit thing is 100% for the artist. So in the transfer show, which was Wade Wallerstein curated it, and it's Kalani Nicole's Transfer Gallery, the shares are 100%. 70% go to the artist, and the other 30% is shared by all of the artists and whoever else worked on the project. And that is resale, because we're talking, you mentioned the idea that the artists get, I don't know if you mentioned it, but one of the good things for all art is you can resell. And when it's resold, you still get a share, as Kenny mentioned, right? Or you could decide not to resell. And in this case, artists get 50% as opposed to the 10% that most get. And in the Feral File, it's the same idea. It's an artist-run platform. The artist gets 70%, and 30% are shared by the other artists, get copies, and the people who are running it who are also artists. So that's
great. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for telling us about those. Okay. Kenny, was there anything that you wanted to add in terms of sort of pros and cons for artists?
Well, I mean, you talk about gatekeepers and access, which are some of the key elements of an artist getting a foothold into the dissemination system of contemporary art. And again, there's good and bad in both sides. And the digital art world, and in particular NFTs, a lot has been said in both. So in a way, the digital art world and the traditional art world, let's call it, they're really two parallel universes. So it's completely untrue that NFTs are decentralized and the artist can take control of the market. And yes, you can go to OpenSea or Rarible, and anyone could, for a relatively small price of transaction fees called gas fees, you can mint your own NFT without any intervention. And also there is the incredible 10% residual function in the smart contract that the artist in perpetuity could participate in the resale. The problem is that as easy as that's, but in a way, like, the shortcomings mirror the art world, but these are two different worlds that eventually are going to collide, and they have begun to collide. The problem is that if you want to actually be remunerated in a real sense of the term, it's the same as in the fine art world today, that you need to be on one of the sites that are, let's say, curated with heavy quotation marks, because a lot of the times these curators have had zero art history. I would say most of them, if not all even, but between us, of course, have had very little, if any, art history training or experience. I mean, again, let's be perfect. The first art class I was ever in, I was teaching at the New School. I'm completely self-taught, but I had the desire and the passion to learn. And I think that a lot of people in the digital space are quite content in this kind of outsider status, not outsiders as you would think in the past, as, you know, whether it's someone with psychiatric issues or whatever, unschooled, generally speaking. A lot of people in the digital world, not only they don't know who Barbara Gladstone is, but they don't want to know who Barbara Gladstone is. So if you want to sell your NFTs, some of the more difficult to get on platforms, commercially speaking, are Super Rare, Foundation, Makerspace, Known Origin, and Nifty Gateway. I have worked on all of those sites, and I find it excruciatingly difficult to sell work. I mean, overall, a lot of the froth, and the average price of an NFT is $100. The average price of a good painting that you could find on Instagram is $100. It's such a misconception to think that art is expensive. Neither art in a traditional form or in a digital form is expensive. Sure, we hear about these stupid cases where they go for crazy prices, like Jerry mentioned, but that's an anomaly, pretty much. Right. Yeah. So anyway, it's a lot of the same parameters and criteria exist also in the digital space.
Fair enough. Okay, so Jerry, I want to ask you a question. I would love, yeah, go ahead.
I just had a couple of quick points before we change the topic. I think it's important to mention when it comes to the benefit for artists, like, yes, the automatic resale rights. Another big benefit is that, you know, a token creates a digital proof of an edition, right? So finally, contemporary artists would have the opportunity to prove their editions, and we wouldn't just have additions based on trusting of a dealer. And I think that to Kenny's point that, if you're going to get resale rights as an artist, you have to be on the specific right platform. I think that raises an excellent point that I think that soon we have to shift the conversation from what we're having now to, okay, so what is the industry going to do to come together to make decisions as a consortium of which blockchains we're using, how are they going to become interoperable, determining common standards and the next steps as an industry in the ways that, for instance, like the fashion industry has done already, right? So, LVMH created a blockchain platform for all of their brands and is now, many other fashion brands have joined on. And so, that's just I think it's another separate, really interesting topic to figure out what are the next steps to make sure that contemporary artists do, get their resale rights from that automatic transaction.
Absolutely. Okay, back to Jerry. I would love to hear you. I feel like art often gets left out of these conversations entirely, so this is going to be my one effort to talk a little bit about art. I would love to hear you talk about some of the kind of high profile NFTs that we've been seeing in the news from your perspective as an art critic. Can we talk about an NFT aesthetic as well as an NFT as a tool or not? What do you think?
Yes, as with art, NFTs are the good, the bad, and the very bad. They have their own almost street aesthetic. Kenny just referred to NFT artists as outsiders. What I see so far is a lot of crap. That doesn't mean I'm right and you NFT artists listening to me have to shoot me. As I posted online, an NFT artist hit me on my left wrist and broke my watch crystal on Hudson Street and 12th Street. He walked past me and said, "I'm an NFT artist, you asshole," and hit me at my wrist. And, I'm sorry. So why I say most of them are bad is because they are conventional in one of the following ways. They're either sort of screensaver or kind of GIF, animation, sci-fi, a little, male softcore porn of like women, over and over and over. You see the same things. It's like being in Nashville that, Dolly Parton wrote Jolene and I Will Always Love You on the same day. Yet she used the same the progression of country and Western chords. So while the form of the NFT may, be a confine, a skyscraper, it's what do you do inside of it? And so far, what I have seen has been pretty meh. It takes less time to look at the damn things than it seems to make them. Again, I am sure that someday there could be a Francis Bacon of NFTs. I don't know. Everybody said iPad art was impossible. And then David Hockney made pretty good iPad drawings. So far, bad. Get to work. Be creative, you big babies.
Thank you, Jerry. And I'm glad that Claudia also already told us a little bit about some of the interesting work that's being done on alternative platforms that may not have gotten as much press. So thanks, Claudia.
Well,
and
those are also platforms where the artists come from, Kenny, but I know you know this, also they went to the School of the Art Institute or wherever. And they are coming from the art history, the long trajectory of discussion, which is art, and moving through there. I think it's really an important time to make a differentiation between what we're calling NFT artists, which is basically meme artists, right? So if you think that meme artists in the best way, Jerry, they would be the ones thinking of them as political cartoonists for the internet, the way we had cartoonists for newspapers. But meme artists are not in the same space as artists, right? So we're using one word and leveling it. And that's, yeah.
We're all jumping into this one. I'm thinking about the phrase, like Marina, how you said that there are critics saying that we're replicating inequalities in the traditional industry. And this just struck me, Jerry, as you're saying that, because this is like how I've been in so many conversations where people who have just discovered NFTs, who are, very influential in the industry, are claiming that the art is bad without having without first doing like complete due diligence, getting a sense of the community. So much of what's beautiful about the NFT, about the blockchain digital art, is the community behind it, and the technologists behind it, and the history of it, and what they hope to achieve. I know, wait, Jerry's still raising his hand. Wait, I'm not finished. And wait, but there's also blockchain as a medium provides conceptually fascinating projects, right? Like Kevin McCoy and Jennifer McCoy with the Whitney, like Kevin Abosh and Ai Weiwei, like ownership, exploring notions of ownership, exploring notions of value. Like, so for me, I'm sad when I hear, yes, anyway. I
would just like to add quickly, well, can I just add from an artistic? No, it's my turn. You went already.
I'm not going to hit your watch.
Wait, I would also
I'd like to see you hit his watch, like reach out.
I'm going to hit it if you don't. Let me just say one quick thing. Also, Jerry, have you ever spent 2 hours looking through, like, there's a site in South America called Hicentuc, HICETNUC, that uses Tezos, which is completely non-detrimental to the environment, which I'm curating, not to tout my own horn, but next week I'm curating an exhibition of NFT art at Nagel Draxler Gallery in Cologne, a 35-year-old conceptual stalwart gallery, and in it will be Kevin Abosh, who was just mentioned by Anne, who's one of the pioneers in the series in the field. There's an artist, Osinachi, who hails from Nigeria, who makes some extraordinary work, and you can equate the work to put it in a painting context. He only makes digital work from Nigeria, and he's found exposure as a digital artist via NFTs, and also a woman artist, Sarah Friend, who's based in Berlin, who makes very consciously community-oriented art to bring technology to poverty-stricken nations, and is very mindful of the community component of what she does. And another artist formerly known as Rob Myers, who now identifies as Raya Myers, again, one of the early pioneers in this space. So they really are disparate people from all walks of life, with all racial backgrounds and sexual identities. And there really is a history to this and a great depth. I mean, I thought when I first got involved myself back in September 2020, like you said, that a lot of it what looked like paintings on the back of a van, but it's like everything. You have to look, you really have to do the legwork, and it's a slow burning process to learn. And yeah, there's no museum that you could step into, or no series of great physical galleries yet, really, but they're beginning to be these communities, like Anne mentioned, and Claudia, and there's great art being made, a lot of which you'll see at my show next week.
I think this is exactly one of the reasons why I was so disappointed that it was the Beeple piece that launched all of this interest, because it's just so disheartening for the community that has been working so, to suddenly have that be the first thing that everyone associates with this. I feel like, okay, now we have to backtrack and like do all of this relearning and et cetera. Yeah, because of everything you just said, Kenny. I feel like there's so much good quality work. And I think that resulted in a lot of knee-jerk instant criticism of what the art is.
Great point. So I want to get to a question that many of our viewers have posed. Jerry.
I do not get to answer being yelled at.
Okay, you can respond, and then we will get to the environmental issues around NFTs.
90% of the art that you see in art galleries is not very good, in your opinion. 90% of the NFTs that you will see are not very good, in your opinion. 90% of the art made during the Renaissance was not very good. We just never see it. I am simply talking about having not done my due diligence. That I absolutely agree. I talked about only the very unfortunate examples that are making the big news and the many that were sent to me. And my overall impression, which I am sure is wrong, but this world feels way too male to me. I know that there are many people who identify as women making NFTs, and I am really making it a point to do my due diligence there. Doesn't make me a good person. Just as Anne said, it's a wonderful community. Well, so is the art world. So is the pizza world. But this world feels so overdeterminedly male. And I know that's changing, but I think we better point this out. And of course, I know it's not all white, but boy, you better really not deny that that's facing.
It's called bro culture, Jerry. It's bro culture. And that's also because of the thing that we still have to talk about, which is the relationship to currency. So
yeah, well, that was one of my questions. So why don't we get into that one now, which is just the general distrust of NFTs in the art world because of this kind of entanglement with crypto. And there are, lots of arguments that have been made about that. There's the argument that cryptocurrencies are sort of money in search of a market, and NFTs prop up or create that market. There's something that you can buy easily with crypto. Others have suggested that NFTs are sort of just a tool for speculation without the hassle of a material object that would have to be stored in a free port and so on. So I'd love to hear any of your thoughts on that issue. Claudia, I think you started already, so.
well, I think that the token, the minting, milling thing, right? So the attaching to an image, the token, and tell me if I'm wrong, all right, but it is, what it's actually doing is mirroring the market. It is the way art is marketized, a speculative object. The tying to an image, the token, which is currency based, is the trading mechanism for the way to up the value, as is in the regular old art world. So it's parallel tracking that. And the super bro thing, I think, happens because the currency, it has been this closed bro tech market, and their idea of what's cool is these most of them are memes, but memes of a flavor, of a very particular flavor that has been very well described, right? So it's sort of the currencies, because they need to distribute in order to accrue value, they seized on art because the art market already existed.
Yep. Okay, let's get to the.
Yeah.
Does anyone find it, I'm amused by the fact that our industry is like baffled by suddenly like claiming that we need regulation, we need transparency. Like, is anyone else baffled by the fact that like suddenly there's this demand, like suddenly everyone's very concerned about like what this cryptocurrency could do and suddenly demanding regulation when obviously like our industry has huge problems with that? Does anyone else find that it's a little hypocritical?
Well, I have to say, like, well, first you mentioned that NFTs have something to do with cryptocurrencies. NFTs basically are cryptocurrency in a sense, the relationship, even though there are more and more sites that will accept fiat currency like US dollar. But also there are some interesting aspects. Number one, I've never bought cryptocurrency in my entire life, nor did I have the vaguest, slightest interest whatsoever until there was an art connection. So you have to think like there was $1 trillion of wealth created out of thin air, literally, or in some mainframe in China. but this wealth was created and there was nothing you could do with it. So there was this crazy amount of creation of wealth and there was nothing to spend it on. So there was this pent up sort of wealth creation. And then all of a sudden with NFTs, collectibles, the NBA things and all of these other things besides the art, all of a sudden there was something to spend it on and the well just opened up and flooded and there was a deluge of like acquisitions of these things. But again, the art world has its own particular brand of hypocrisy. So all of the things, immediately the art world threw its arms up. Oh, art is the NFTs are just about currency. It's all, you can never see your NFT. The majority of art that's bought and sold next week at Christie, Sotheby's, and then in June in Phillips, it all gets stuck and never sees the light of day because it's in a warehouse. People see more of their art on their computer and their phone. Most people never refer to their art when it's in a free port, not until it's sold and they look at the invoice or something. So again, like the art world was pissed off that a dog was pissing on its tree, and they all of a sudden the art world says, oh, this is about speculation and this is only about money and this is about money laundering and tax evasion. That was the purview of the fine art world as we knew it 6 months ago. And that's the first thing that they're all seizing upon, complaining. And it's really it's a parallel universe. It's a lot of change. And the only thing that's changing, it's all the same. I mean, really, there's no differences. It's just another thing. And the art world is being very protective of its own territory.
Okay, thank you, Kenny. Great.
I think it's also like, if I'm hoping that we can move beyond focusing on the currency and focusing on blockchain technology as a very boring, foundational technology that can create supply chain management for all of the artworks and create, like, just simplify the way that we transact back, so the hope is that we can just move on from that association and dig into what the technology actually does.
Yeah, thank you. So I do want to touch on the environmental question and then jump into Q&A because we have so many great questions coming in. So if we can keep this concise, although it's a gigantic issue, many of our viewers have posed questions about the environmental impact of NFTs. And I wonder if one of you could kind of summarize the concerns for us and also the viability of any efforts that you've seen to make NFTs greener or more environmentally friendly.
Anne, do you want to do that?
Sure. So the majority of NFTs are created, are minted on the Ethereum blockchain. And Ethereum currently has a consensus mechanism. So the way that that each block is created on a single chain, the mechanism that makes that happen is called proof of work. And it is that consensus process that is very compute intensive and has become an environmentally, like at this point, like is hugely problematic. Ethereum is planning to switch to a different consensus mechanism called proof of stake that is significantly more environmentally sustainable. And so I think we will see that, and I've also read about different consensus mechanisms that are being explored. And the one initiative that I wanted to mention that I've seen that I'm excited about was founded by Jason Bailey, who is a longtime thought leader in this space and digital art expert. And he has created on Gitcoin, he's created an initiative that will gather projects that explore the different blockchains that are available that are working sustainably, and will promote just knowledge about that. And he's doing a lot of R&D to create essentially just like one major resource for the community to just educate themselves on which blockchains we should be using in the future, et cetera. So for me, his green NFTs project is I think, really notable.
Great. Thank you, Anne. So let's dive into these questions. We have 30 questions, so we're not going to get to all of them, but let's try to get to a few. So the first one I want to read is from Joey Orr. And Joey says, doesn't the NFT further the tired concept of the authentic original that artists fought so hard to combat through the many waves of institutional critique and different forms of dematerialized art? Isn't blockchain more interesting than the way that the NFT is being taken up right now? So I don't know if that's a question that Claudia might want to answer or someone else.
Well, I think that's what we've been talking about, that the digital art is not in what we've been talking about as a currency trade object, right? It's space. in which artists do many, many things. And as speaking as someone who's been in it for 25 years, it's not really, I will agree with you, Kenny, it's not really cool when you can't earn any money whatsoever for your practice. And maybe this idea of the aura of the authentic real that's safe is a cultural construction that is now being endowed on those of us who've been working in an ephemeral mediums, who were functioning outside of the market, totally. So we have less rage against it because it's something that we have not participated in for the most part. It's sort of out there. So these are also cultural constructions about what's good and real, the real thing, the true thing. It's a made up ethical value system. And when you're not thought of as being that, it's not really that particularly fab, right? Sort of a drag.
You think about like when Vito Acconci masturbated under the floor in 1972 at Ileana Sonnabend's gallery, and he was trying to make this art movement of dematerialization and art that couldn't really be swallowed, so to speak, by the collecting world. And in spite, the market will consume anything, whether you want it to or not, if it's something that it deems, buy and sellable. So when you think about scarcity and this kind of fake notions of what's limited, what's rare is such a term that gets bandied around, and half of these platforms have the word rare in them, super rare, rareable. But the fact is, like, what does that even mean? All of the art I've ever made in my life, and still to this day, is free on Vimeo and YouTube. And all of the digital photographic imagery that I make is on my archive in a high-res version. I don't care what you do with it. And if someone wants to buy it, then they buy really a certificate of authenticity registered on the blockchain. And the image is basically in the same place it was before we started. And the fact is, like, if Richard Prince, bless his soul, like, if someone rocks up and buys a nurse painting for $5 million, and then he takes a silk screen and runs it on canvas again and makes another, that's an exact replica. So what is unique? Or a photograph outside the edition. It was spoken about before that this is the first way by Anne that you could create scarcity and like control of an edition, but still you could mint something 400 times that's unique and an edition of one. So really, and then when Alec Baldwin wanted a particular Ross Bleckner painting, well, Ross painted him another one and backdated it, but that's yet another story. So anyway, it's a matter of intent, and there's no easy, simple answer for any of it.
Yeah, great. Okay, next question is from Christina Leifson. She says, I would be interested in a discussion of who the art NFT buyers are. I've heard that more often than not, it's Bitcoin/cryptocurrency investors, and that Silicon Valley types rather than art collectors per se. Is that true? And if so, what can we deduce from that? Anyone have thoughts on that? Who are the buyers?
I'm happy to jump in. Yeah, I do think, again, like there is this, I heard from someone at Christie's that, something like 80% of their bidders for the Beeple piece were first time buyers to Christie's, right? I think, yes, that there's, the familiarity with the technology, the familiarity with, like, again, collecting something that is more aligned with potentially like your own particular interests or the industry in which you work. And I remember thinking when I was still at Christie's, there's always been this sort of eagerness in the industry to, like, how do we tap into the tech sector, right? How do we expand our buyers who are engaged in technology? And I remember thinking, like, if you're working with media that they, not to generalize, but like may understand more, or innately like more, like familiar with, that if we're engaging technology even more seriously as a medium, like, could that be a way to naturally engage them? And so I think it kind of goes to Kenny's earlier point of like these two like parallel functions, right? Like there's traditional industry and then traditional market as we know it. And then, this digital art world that is more accessible and more understandable for certain people. Actually, the Winklevoss twins were quoted when they bought their first CryptoPunk as saying it was the first piece of art they ever bought because it was the first thing they could understand. And I know, I think there's something really interesting to that. And it'll be really interesting to see when the two kind of collide. If they will, I don't know. I think we'll see what happens there.
Well,
Yeah.
as someone who shows in a digital gallery, I will say that Steve Sachs, whose Bitforms is his gallery, and he has gotten many people like that, Anne, who say, oh, there's digital art. What you got? And they want to know about it and want to learn about it, and had previously been not within that space whatsoever. So it's called spillover. There's already a term.
Yeah. Okay, next question is from George LaGrady, and I'll pose this one to Jerry. He would like to know who purchased your NFT and why.
Do not know, and I do not know, but I'm sort of, Kenny would know. I can't remember the name of the buyer. I think they bought it because they might have thought, because of my notoriety and Kenny's, that they could use it as some sort of publicity to promote something. And I really wanted to tell whoever that was, like, never gonna happen. But you're probably going to
Right.
money. I should add that I have still been unable to convert the crypto blockchain currency, and I am not sure what it is called. I can't convert to Memorial Sloan Kettering does not know how.
Jerry, sorry, let me interrupt you. Your sound is doing that thing that it was doing before. I still caught that, but if you wanna, there you go. Okay, Jerry is gonna fix his sound. Kenny, is there anything you wanted to add in terms of, do you know who the buyer was?
Well, the buyer was, I mean, again, it's funny because against NFTs, people say that it's going to be transparency and a clear provenance that's easy to identify. The buyer of the NFT that Jerry did has identified himself as Alfred Hitchcock instead of Alfred Hitchcock. And he sent me an email about what his intent to do was. And it seems he wants Jerry to acknowledge that crypto art is legitimate. And he's created, he sent an email to the effect that there are some things that he wanted Jerry to do with his MetaMask wallet, which is never going to happen because I'm still trying to explain what the basic fundamentals are of this whole process. And anyway, he's saying that if somebody doesn't cough up 440 ETH for the piece that's sold for 40, if someone doesn't pay 10 times the amount that was paid, he's going to do something with the original, threatening that it's going to disappear. So, I mean,
Good Lord.
Yeah, good Lord is right. I have a friend who I've met through social media who is a 20-year-long employee at Google, an engineer, and he happens to be an incredible collector of NFTs. As a perfect example of this hybrid, there's no way to generalize or categorize who these collectors are. They're a really vast array of people. In the same way, there is still something called connoisseurs, which generally belong in a museum of natural history in a vitrine, that simply love art and want to learn about it. And in the same manner, there are people that love digital art and have never sold their portfolio of NFTs. And my friend who is the real collector, who has a vast collection, he's not an executive at Google, he's an engineer, and he's managed to string together an incredible collection. And we're still in the process of him trying to unpack what the hell Mr. Hitchcock is intending or threatening to do. But like Jerry said, ultimately, he has some ulterior motive, just like the Beeple buyer. I won't call him a collector. He owned a load of Beeple and he was trying to capitalize on that fact. So this guy has something up his digital sleeve and I'm still trying to decipher what the hell it is exactly.
Interesting. Okay. Next question is from Kimberly Graham. Kimberly says, as collectors amass NFTs, it is only logical to imagine that museums and archives will inherit them through donation or bequest. What impact will inheriting NFT art likely have on those repositories? And what responsibility will they then have in maintaining them? I'm very curious to hear your answers to this. And maybe I'll just tack on to that. Do you think museums should be wading into this space or not?
Not if they're going to spend too much money. Start slow, for fuck's sake. And I'm not even sure that these devices will be able to read NFTs in 5 years. They may be so antiquated, like a VHS recording, but I know nothing how to answer that.
I can tackle perhaps the second part of that question about museums wading into it. I think that we are in this moment where there's sort of a desperation and hunger for, thought leadership and, again, due diligence, and looking into, like, how do we form an industry consortium of industry leaders, and how do we think about how this technology should be implemented moving forward. And so I think that, for instance, like hosting like the Hirshhorn's, involvement in becoming a thought leader in the space, educating, like, I think that we have to do a lot more educating before we, I don't know, that's sort of my instinct of how museums, because I think there are other ways that the technology could benefit the museum structure generally, like simpler loaning processes, easier access to more private collectors. The project that the nonprofit that I work on is creating divided ownership opportunities for objects of cultural heritage that, might be, marred in ownership disputes between, name your Western European museum and a country in sub-Saharan Africa, right? So creating new ownership opportunities, I think that could be super interesting for museums. So again, my instinct is hold the phone a little bit. Let's keep doing the research and like a little more due diligence. That's how I would react if I were working at a museum. As far as the first question about how, what implication this has for donating. I think that, again, for me, if they were donated on a platform, and actually I think that the person who asked could look into the company called Vastari, Vastari, who's trying to work with the technology to create easier loaning opportunities, again, to create just like a bridge between collectors and museums. And so for me, the more interesting element is the ways in which it opens up. It simplifies the experience for museums and collectors. But I don't really I don't know. I have a hard time answering the other one.
Yeah, no, actually, Jerry mentioned the issue of obsolescence, which is another question that came up in the Q&A box. And maybe, go ahead, Kenny.
I think museums have an obligation to wade into this space. They miss not to. We live in a world characterized by technology, and that is the future of life and the future of art. So it would be ridiculous. What if galleries or museums never tried to preserve these early conceptual videos of VHS or whatever format? So you just change them to another format. There's been a lot of talk about, so when you buy an NFT, you're not even buying the art. Forget conceptually or theoretically what you're getting. You're buying something on a ledger system, which is really a digital certificate of authenticity. It's not the Dan Flavin, it's not the light fixture. The light fixture, metaphorically speaking, is hosted on like the cloud in the same way that my website is hosted on the cloud. So right now, like, again, there was some amazing talk by Anne about these community standards or these, standards for the industry. And these things need to be identified. Right now, the majority of the platforms are using a system called interplanetary file sharing service. I may sound more competent and knowledgeable than I am. I'll admit I am not, most assuredly. But there is a new system from people I've been speaking to. I just tried to listen to people that actually do know something. There's another system called Arweave, which is has a much more staying capacity, is a much potentially more long-term solution to some of these problems where if you open up your wallet, like Jerry said, 5 years from now, and you're gonna find a lot of blank squares that indicate your collection. So, I was just told by these amazing, I'm in Vienna and I met up with this group called Crypto Wiener. As funny as it sounds, they're a bunch of very young kids making some really interesting digital art that also harks back to the history of the blockchain, not just NFTs. And they said that there's something called mint base. And instead of when you mint on OpenSea, if you're an art maker out there, instead of just minting your NFT on OpenSea for the same exact price or access of entry, you could mint it on Mintbase. And Mintbase is another system where your NFTs would show up in your account on OpenSea, but it uses Arweave, and Arweave is a tokenized storage system which has a much greater longevity already. So all of these, look, we're in a wildly fluctuating world. Look at the politics, look at the social dilemmas that we're in. And technologically, I say that it's compressed time with like dog years, where like 6 months, yet a year in technology space is like 7 years in real life. And it's really exciting just to be on the cusp of what's happening. And it's normal, this type of thing. This is the new normal, and museums would be foolish to ignore it at any stage.
I want to also add about Nam-June Pike, right? So the idea, there's a cottage industry which is producing those tubes, the cathode ray tubes. So although those TVs don't exist anymore, and digital conservation began with the cottage industry, which is known as the Nam-June Pike business. And I just hold the work to the Whitney, which consists as a component of a VR, which means they had to buy the computers, freeze them, the software, the headsets, right? The software used to make it, and the software that I produced, and make a copy of it and put it in the basement, right? That's like Nam-June Pike, right? Where you have to do that. So it's not totally over the top to think that you might keep those phones, hold that phone over there and migrate the stuff in the cloud. And the planetary stuff problem is you have to pay dues with it every month. And what if, you know, or they go broke, right? It's a business. So there are, you know, there are ways to do it. You can have a server, keep the stuff, meaning a bunch of computers in the museum that's serving their own stuff. So there are ways to work around it. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask one last question because we're already a couple minutes over time. So an anonymous attendee would like to ask, where do you see NFTs in the next decade? Do we have any predictions from the group? NFTs in the next decade?
I think NFTs will be where painting or sculpture or macrame or, you know, any, it's a tool, it's a medium, it's a genre, it's a form, and it depends what people do with them as art. That's my particular addiction. And, you know, Kathy Griffin was messengering me. I don't know her. Yesterday night, like, about NFTs, and I said, the fuck I know.
I would say that, like, in the way that there's been like Tupac is on tour giving concerts and in projected holographic way, man, I could see like in the future, I mean, during lockdown, COVID has been an incredible human catastrophe and tragedy, and I've been a long haul sufferer myself. Thankfully, I'm vaccinated now. And in Europe, I mean, I'm going to Germany, they're still under complete lockdown. It's crazy, but I just think that like with these, sooner or later, that with like, you know, technology was accelerated probably by 10 years, our assimilation during COVID. And what passes for technology in the backward looking, archly conservative art world is OVR. What's an OVR? I would say it's a glorified website, but it's a shitty website that hasn't changed in 100 years. I mean, there's nothing profoundly, you know, technological about a website that has static JPEGs. So I think like you'll be able to buy a computer file and project a 3-dimensional sculpture in your house, or you can get these things incredibly 3D printed from a file that you buy. So I think, like, you know, whatever the word, whatever the imagination can imagine. The reason I could barely ever read fiction is because what happens in real life is so outlandish and so crazy and over the top and unimaginable at the time. But there's a lot of people smarter than me, and I don't know, you guys seem a lot smarter than me as well, but doing crazy great things. And I think that whatever you could dream of, three-dimensional work, why not? How come at this stage you can't go visit a gallery and walk around a painting and kick it and touch it and project it into your living room? These are all the things that are going to change. And instead of, you know, you look at an NFT from now, and behind Anne are these like ridiculously ancient looking CryptoPunks. The reason they're so coveted is that they were the first. They were the first NFT that was created with artificial intelligence on the blockchain as a collectible thing, divorced from a game. And I think that that will be, they'll always be relevant because they were there first in a historical capacity. And next will be just whatever you can look back at some of these movies from the 50s and 60s, or the Jetsons cartoon as a child you used to watch. And that's what's going to happen next. It'll just be immaterial art coming to life that will be with me in my hotel room, be on the train with me when I go travel to the next destination for my show. And then you can, you know, but like, it was such a cool concept that Claudia mentioned, like the Whitney having this in cold storage, all this equipment. That's great because that's tracking, it's like history in real time that we're all experiencing and talking about, and it's just going to get more exciting. And you can't just dismiss something because you're fearful of change, which is a human inclination. And the art world complains a lot, but they're complaining because they're losing control, and that's not something they sit easily with.
Thank you, Kenny. Any last words, Anne or Claudia?
Losing control of the market. That's my last words.
That was a perfect note to end on. Happy to leave it there.
That's great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Anne, Claudia, Kenny, and Jerry for joining us tonight. This was great. I'm sorry to those who asked questions that we weren't able to answer. We just have so many questions tonight. Also, a big thank you to Claire, who was running our live captioning tonight. And finally, a big thank you to all of you for tuning in. Please join us again on Wednesday, May 12th for the next installment of Talking to Our Time, which will be a conversation with Diana Al-Hadid. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Marina.